Unsolved mysteries have always been really intriguing to humans, and I totally see why. It's so cool to sit around and think about how these things that pretty much have no explanation could have happened. So today I found an iceberg that goes over some paranormal unsolved mysteries. These are my favorite kind, and let's just get straight into this. I'm trying to hit 100k subs by the end of the year, and I think we can do it, so please subscribe so we can get there. Follow my Instagram, join my Discord, and let's get straight into the first entry, the Brown Mountain Lights. The Brown Mountain Lights are one of those intriguing mysteries that blend folklore, science, and the allure of the unexplained into a fascinating story. Located in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, these mysterious lights have been reported for over a century, with sightings dating back to at least the early 1900s, and some claim even earlier, with Cherokee legends mentioning similar phenomena. The lights are typically described as glowing orbs that hover over the ridge of Brown Mountain, varying in color from white to blue to red. I mean, I guess that makes sense. It is in America, right? America. Anyways, these lights appear at irregular intervals, sometimes dancing in the sky, sometimes moving slowly along the ridge, and then vanishing without a trace. One of the most captivating aspects of the Brown Mountain Lights is their elusiveness. Many people have tried to capture them on camera with varying degrees of success. The lights seem to defy explanation, appearing both to locals and tourists who venture to the area, hoping to catch a glimpse of the mysterious phenomenon. Theories about what causes the lights are plentiful and diverse. Some suggest natural explanations, such as swamp gas, which is known to produce ghostly lights, or the piezoelectric effect, where quartz in the mountain creates electrical discharges. Another scientific theory involves atmospheric conditioning, creating a mirage effect, where lights from nearby towns or cars are reflected and distorted. However, none of these explanations fully satisfy the curiosity of those who have seen the lights firsthand. This has led to more speculative and fantastical theories. Some believe the lights are the spirits of Native Americans or Civil War soldiers wandering the mountains. Others think they might be UFOs or some form of extraterrestrial communication. The allure of the supernatural is strong, and the lack of a definitive explanation only fuels the mystery further. But no one really knows, despite a bunch of investigations by scientists, researchers, and even the US Geological Survey, it's still unsolved. One of the earliest documented observations of the Brown Mountain Lights came from a fisherman named William M. Smith in 1913. Smith reported seeing strange lights while fishing on the Linville River, describing them as glowing balls of light that seemed to move with purpose along the ridge of the Brown Mountain. His report sparked widespread curiosity and led to further investigations. In 1916, a major flood occurred in the region, causing significant disruption. Following the flood, a group of scientists from the US Geological Survey, led by George R. Mansfield, conducted an investigation into the lights. Mansfield's team concluded that the lights were likely the result of locomotive headlights reflecting off the clouds or mist. However, this explanation did not satisfy everyone, as sightings continued even in conditions where such reflections would not be possible. Then there's the Native American legend, and this tale is perhaps the most poetic and haunting. According to Cherokee lore, the lights are the spirits of maidens searching for their lost lovers, who were warriors killed in battle. These stories suggest that the lights represent the souls of these grieving maidens forever wandering the mountains in search of their beloved. This theory not only adds a romantic and melancholic dimension to the lights, but also connects the phenomenon to a deep cultural and spiritual history of the region. And it's fascinating to think that these lights, which we now ponder with scientific curiosity and creepiness, were once integrated into the fabric of Native American spiritual beliefs, serving as a reminder of loss and the enduring power of love and grief. And then next we have the piezoelectric theory, which we already talked about a little bit. This scientific explanation hinges on the unique geological composition of Brown Mountain, particularly its abundance of quartz. Quartz crystals can generate an electric charge when subjected to mechanical stress, such as tectonic movements, and then this charge could potentially create the glowing effect observed above the ridge. This is a fascinating hypothesis that ties the mystery of the lights to the very bones of the earth. So imagine the mountain as a giant battery, naturally, discharging energy in the form of mysterious lights. While this theory is compelling, it's still unproven. Also, personal stories add a rich layer of mystery to the Brown Mountain Lights. For instance, a local resident named Tommy Hunter has become somewhat of an unofficial historian and guide to this phenomenon. Hunter has spent decades observing and documenting the lights, collecting hundreds of eyewitness accounts. He recounts stories of seeing lights that seem to chase each other, merge into one, and then split again. His dedication has made him a local legend and a go-to resource for those intrigued by the lights. In recent years, Appalachian State University researchers have taken a scientific approach to solving the mystery. In 2016, they installed a series of high-resolution cameras around around Brown Mountain to continuously monitor the area. Their goal was to capture and study the lights in a controlled scientific manner. While they did record several instances of unexplained lights, the data was still inconclusive. That's just crazy that they still couldn't figure it out. Also, the Brown Mountain lights have attracted a lot of attention from like paranormal investigators and television shows like Mystery Hunters and X-Files, which is insane. Now, Tommy Anderson's story is pretty interesting. In 2014, Anderson, a photographer, managed to capture high-definition images of the Brown Mountain lights. His photos show bright, pulsing orbs that change color, providing some of the clearest visual evidence to date. Anderson's images went viral, sparking renewed interest and debate, which is awesome. His work exemplifies how a single individual's effort can significantly contribute to our understanding, or further mystification, of a phenomenon. This is so cool, but let's move on to the next one, guys. So next up, we have the Blackeyed Children. Blackeyed Children are a modern urban legend that has captured the imagination and fear of many people since the late 1990s. These eerie entities are typically described as children, usually between the ages of 6 and 16, who have pale skin and completely black eyes. No white in the eyes, no iris, just solid black. The stories about them often follow a similar pattern. They appear at people's doors or car windows asking to be let in, usually with strange, monotone voices and unsettling behavior. The first known account of Blackeyed Children was posted by journalist Brian Bethel in 1996. Bethel recounted an encounter in Abilene, Texas, where two boys approached his car and asked for a ride. He described feeling an overwhelming sense of dread as he noticed their pitch black eyes. Despite their polite and calm demeanor, something about them just felt profoundly wrong to him, leading him to drive away quickly. Bethel's story spread rapidly online, giving rise to numerous similar accounts from others who claim to have had encounters with these strange children. There are several theories about what Blackeyed Children might be. One prevalent theory is that Blackeyed Children are the spirits of deceased children. This idea is rooted in the belief that the children's black eyes and unsettling behaviors signify their existence as restless souls. Proponents of this theory argue that the children might be seeking closure, assistance, or simply wandering the earthly plane because of unresolved issues from their past lives. The notion that they appear at people's doors or windows asking for help or to be let in could be interpreted as a plea for someone to aid them in finding peace. This story resonates with the traditional ghost story motif where spirits seek to communicate with the living to resolve unfinished business. Another chilling theory is that Blackeyed Children are demonic entities or vampires. Okay, so I didn't mention this earlier yet, I was gonna mention it later, but I'll mention it now. One of the most chilling aspects of these encounters is the children's insistence on being let in. They often use phrases like, "let us in," or "we need to use the phone," delivered in an oddly formal and robotic manner. Witnesses describe feeling an intense, almost primal fear when interacting with them, as if their very presence triggers a deep-seated survival instinct. So this perspective about them being like demonic entities or vampires stems from the children's need for an invitation to enter a home or a car, echoing classic vampire lore where vampires cannot enter a residence without being invited. Their black eyes are seen as a manifestation of their malevolent nature, and the intense fear they inspire in witnesses could be a supernatural ability to instill terror. Some believe that once invited in, these entities could cause harm or bring about a curse, as suggested by reports of bad luck or health issues following encounters. A more otherworldly theory proposes that Blackeyed Children are aliens or alien-human hybrids. Advocates of this idea point to their unusual, unnatural appearance and the profound sense of dread they evoke as evidence of their extraterrestrial origins. The black eyes are seen as a hallmark of alien physiology, reminiscent of that, the classic, gray alien image with large dark eyes, but who knows. Also, while this one isn't really like a paranormal theory, it's still worth considering the psychological and sociological angles. Some experts suggest that the Blackeyed Children phenomenon might be a result of mass hysteria or the power of suggestion, amplified by the internet and popular culture. Stories shared online can create a feedback loop where the fears and details of the encounters become more vivid and widespread. And then people primed with the knowledge of these tales might interpret any strange or unsettling encounter through the lens of the Blackeyed Children narrative, reinforcing the legend. Now, another compelling story about this involves a woman in Vermont who reported hearing a loud knock at her door late at night. She found found two children standing on her porch, insisting they need to come inside to use the phone. Their insistence and the deep fear that she felt led her to refuse entry, eventually causing the children to leave. And like other witnesses, she described feeling an unnatural fear and noticing their pitch black eyes only after a few minutes of interaction. And then in some cases, people who have encountered black-eyed children report experiencing bad luck or health issues afterward, adding to the legend's ominous reputation. These post-encounter effects contribute to the fear surrounding them and lead some to believe that letting them in would result in pretty dire consequences. So thank God not many people do that. Now, going back to the Vermont case, I want to explain it in a little bit more detail because it's pretty interesting. So this is actually during a winter storm. There was a woman in Vermont during like a crazy Vermont winter storm. She heard a loud knock at her door late at night and found two children standing outside, asking to come in because their parents would be there soon. The children insisted they needed to come inside to use the phone. The woman felt an intense fear, but couldn't explain why. And then as she hesitated, she noticed their eyes, completely black, devoid of any white. And then she slammed the door and locked it, watching as the children continued to stare through the window for several moments before disappearing back into the night. In another case from the UK, a man named Paul encountered the black-eyed children while walking his dog. It was early evening and Paul was on a path near his home when he noticed a child standing alone. Concerned for the child's safety, he approached and asked if everything was all right. The child looked up, revealing pitch black eyes. Paul described feeling an overwhelming sense of dread and a compulsion to leave early. He backed away and quickly walked home, his dog equally disturbed and pulling on the leash to leave. This encounter emphasizes the geological spread of this phenomenon. Like, it's in the UK. They even had the black-eyed children there, dude. I thought all they had there was like, I don't know, like knives and chips, mate. Dude, if they can get the black-eyed children all the way from America to the UK, you'd think they could get like at least like one dentist. Like, come on. That was a joke. That was a joke. I love my UK brothers and sisters and siblings of a non-binary stature. I love all my UK people. I'm just kidding, guys. Anyways, a more recent story involves a group of friends camping in the woods. They were sitting around a campfire when they heard rustling in the bushes. Thinking it might be an animal, they were shocked to see two children emerge from the darkness. The children asked if they could join the group and warm themselves by the fire. The friends, feeling uneasy but not yet aware of the children's eyes, agreed. As the night went on, the children behaved oddly, asking strange questions and speaking in monotone voices, and then eventually one of the friends noticed their eyes and alerted the group. The realization brought a wave of panic, and the friends quickly packed up and left the campsite, leaving the children behind. While Brian Bethel's encounter is often cited as the first major event, another significant event happened in Abilene, Texas. A man reported being awoken in the middle of the night by a loud knocking on his door. He found two children standing on his porch asking to be let inside to use the phone. And then just like the woman in Vermont, the man felt an overwhelming sense of dread but couldn't pinpoint why. As he continued to talk to the children, he noticed their black eyes and immediately shut the door, refusing to let them in. And then again, just like the woman in Vermont, he watched through the peephole as the children stood there for a few more minutes before leaving. Okay, then there's one more story. A particularly striking story involves a U.S. Marine stationed at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. God, there's too much stuff going on in North Carolina, bro. Too much. I'm from North Carolina. I'm recording this in North Carolina right now. This is like where I'm from. And let's just say the Brown Mountain Lights we talked about earlier are not the furthest from me. It's kind of scary. In the same state, like it's a little spooky. Anyways, this Marine was in his barracks one evening when he heard a knock at the door. He opened it to find two children standing there asking to be let in. The Marine immediately felt, guess what, a deep sense of fear and noticed the children's black eyes. And then despite their polite requests, he slammed the door shut and locked it. And then he later reported this to like his superiors, and his superiors could find no trace of the children. It's kind of scary because you'd think there'd be like a lot of cameras and stuff in a military base, but nope, no trace. All right, next up, let's talk about ghosts. Ghosts are a concept that has fascinated humanity for centuries, appearing in cultures and belief systems around the world. These entities are typically understood to be the spirits or souls of deceased individuals who, for various reasons, have not passed on to the afterlife or remain attached to the earthly realm. The nature of ghosts, their behavior, and their purposes vary widely depending on cultural, religious, and personal beliefs. Anyways, throughout history, ghosts have been depicted in literature, folklore, and religious texts. In ancient Egypt, it was believed that the soul consisted of several parts, and improper burial rituals could cause one part, the ka, to become a ghost. In ancient Rome, ghosts were often seen as malevolent spirits that needed to be appeased through rituals and offerings. In many Asian cultures, particularly in China and Japan, ghosts are believed to be the souls of those who died tragically or with unresolved issues. Now, there are like a lot of like modern sightings of ghosts or whatever, but psychologists suggest that the human tendency to see patterns and assign agency to the unknown, known as pareidolia, can explain many ghost sightings. Additionally, the power of suggestion and expectation plays a pretty significant role. People who believe in ghosts or are in a setting where they perceive as haunted, they're like more likely to interpret ambiguous stimuli or just like the unknown as paranormal activities. Now, despite the lack of scientific evidence, ghost stories persist and often become part of local folklore. One famous example is the Amityville horror, where the Lutz family reported terrifying paranormal experiences in their new home, which had been the site of a brutal mass murder. Their story became the basis for books and films, though skeptics have since questioned its authenticity. And then another well-known haunting is that of the Tower of London, reputed to be one of the most haunted places in England. The ghost of Anne Boleyn, the executed queen, is said to haunt the tower, with numerous sightings reported over the centuries. Similarly, the Winchester Mystery House in California, built by Sarah Winchester, the widow of a gun magnate, is famous for its labyrinth design intended to confuse spirits that she believed were haunting her due to the deaths caused by the Winchester rifles. Now, there's a lot of ghost hunting that happens, like Ed Warren, you know? He was the guy that did the Amityville horror. He basically just like investigated paranormal cases, and there are a lot of ghost hunters and like paranormal investigators. And Ed Warren's work obviously inspired the movie The Conjuring and like all the movies in the Conjuring verse, like Annabelle and stuff. But then what I wanted to talk about that I researched a little bit is some of the lesser known and more intriguing aspects of ghost lore that aren't super like well known or typically well known, you know? Like everything I talked about already with ghosts are like pretty like, oh yeah, duh. So one fascinating theory is the concept of time slips, where people believe that they briefly experience a different time period. These events often include sightings of ghosts that appear as solid and real as living people, but dressed in clothing from another era and engaging in activities typical of that time. For example, there are accounts from Liverpool's Bold Street where people claim to have suddenly found themselves in the 1950s or 60s, only to return to the present moment later on. And then these experiences raise the question of whether some ghost sightings could just be encounters with echoes from the past, like time travel. Next, I want to talk about the stone tape theory. The stone tape theory suggests that buildings or places can absorb and later replay scenes from the past, like a tape recorder. The theory posits that emotional or traumatic events can imprint themselves on the physical environment, and that when conditions are right, these imprints can be replayed, leading to sightings of ghosts. This concept was popularized by the 1972 British television play The Stone Tape, but it has its roots in earlier ideas about residual hauntings, where the environment itself retains a memory of past events. Crisis apparitions are ghostly visitations that occur at the time of a person's death or during a moment of great distress. These apparitions are often reported by loved ones who see or sense the presence of the person in their final moments, even if they're far away. So that's kind of interesting. Phantom hitchhikers are a subset of ghost stories where drivers pick up a seemingly real hitchhiker who then mysteriously disappear from the vehicle. These tales are prevalent around the world, with variations in details, but a pretty consistent core narrative. In many stories, the hitchhiker provides an address or destination, but when the driver arrives, the passenger has just vanished. Upon inquiring at the given address, the driver often learns that the hitchhiker was someone who died years ago, typically in a car accident on that very road, which is that's like some like top tier ghost story. Like that's the stuff I love. That's creepy, bro. And then another interesting one that we already kind of talked about a little bit earlier on is ghost lights and will-o'-the-wisps. Ghost lights, such as the Brown Mountain lights and will-o'-the-wisps, are mysterious lights seen in marshes, swamps, and other areas. These lights are often attributed to supernatural causes such as spirits or fairies, and have been a part of folklore for centuries. In some traditions, will-o'-the-wisps are said to lead travelers astray, while in others they're considered to be the souls of the dead seeking to guide or warn the living. Scientific explanations, such as the combustion of gases like methane, exist, but they don't fully account for the eeriness and persistent presence of these lights in ghost lore. Also, I just want to quickly mention that there's apparently been sightings of animal ghosts, like people seeing their pets that they like are like around even after they've like died. And then even famous locations like the Tower of London and the Gettysburg battlefield are also reported to have ghostly animals, such as spectral horses or hounds, which is just insane and kind of cute. Next up is Girls See Ghosts and Run. This video shows two young girls sitting at a table when one of them suddenly becomes distressed, apparently after seeing something in a dark kitchen. Despite reassurances from the adult filming that it's just a dark room, the girl remains scared. Her friend initially laughs, but then also screams in terror after looking into the kitchen. The video doesn't show anything visible that could explain their fear, so that suggests that they might have seen something supernatural or that a prank was played on on them, but I'll just have my editor put a few clips of the video in here so you get the gist, and then we can move on. And then next up on the iceberg, we have shadow people. Shadow people are a phenomenon often described as dark, human-shaped figures seen peripherally or in dim light. Unlike typical ghost sightings, these entities are usually perceived as solid black silhouettes without discernible features. Reports of shadow people vary widely. Some people feel a menacing presence, while others experience no fear. Explanations range from paranormal to psychological, including theories about interdimensional beings, sleep paralysis, and the mind's reaction to stress or sensory deprivation. The concept of shadowy figures has existed in folklore and mythology for centuries. In ancient cultures, shadowy entities were often seen as spirits or demons. For example, in ancient Egypt, the shadow was considered a part of the soul. In modern times, the term shadow person has become more widely recognized due to reports and stories shared across media and the internet. One common scientific explanation for shadow people is sleep paralysis, a condition where a person, either falling asleep or waking up, temporarily experiences an inability to move or speak while being fully conscious. During sleep paralysis, it's not uncommon for individuals to see shadowy figures or feel a presence in the room. This phenomenon can be terrifying though, and it's been linked to various cultural interpretations of ghostly or demonic visitations. Among the many reports of shadow people, a specific figure known as the Hat Man has become prominent. Described as a tall, shadowy figure wearing a wide-brimmed hat, the Hat Man is often associated with a particularly intense feeling of dread. Sightings of the Hat Man have been reported worldwide, leading some to speculate about a common underlying cause or a shared cultural archetype. Now, psychologists suggest that shadow people might just be a product of the human mind, especially under conditions of stress, anxiety, or sensory deprivation. The brain can create vivid images and experiences, particularly in a state of heightened emotional arousal. This theory posits that shadow people are kind of waking dream or hallucination influenced by personal fears and cultural narratives. Now, some paranormal researchers propose that shadow people are beings from a parallel dimension or alternate reality. According to this theory, these entities can occasionally cross over into our world, becoming visible to us. This idea is supported by the experiences of those who report seeing shadow people with human-like forms, but lacking detailed features, as if they are silhouettes or shadows of beings from another plane of existence. This theory aligns with the concept of a multiverse, where multiple dimensions can exist alongside our own, occasionally intersecting. Another popular belief is that shadow people are a form of residual energy or spirits. This idea posits that traumatic events or strong emotions can leave an imprint on a location, creating a type of energy that manifests as a shadow figure. These entities might be bound to specific places where significant events occurred, replaying these events like a recording. Unlike intelligent hauntings, where spirits interact with the living, residual hauntings involve energy that doesn't seem to be aware of its surroundings or able to communicate. Now, some witnesses describe interactions with shadow people that suggest these entities possess a form of consciousness or intelligence. For example, there were reports of shadow people reacting to the presence of observers, like moving away when approached or even following individuals. These experiences lead some to believe that shadow people are sentient beings with their own motives and awareness. This aspect of the phenomenon raises questions about their nature and purpose, like whether they're guardians, watchers, or beings with unknown intentions. Now, the recurrence of shadow people in various cultures and periods suggests that they may also represent a universal archetype in human consciousness. Carl Jung's theory of the collective unconscious proposes that certain symbols and figures, like shadow people, are shared across humanity's collective psyche. These entities might embody the human fear of the unknown, darkness, and death. They could be manifestations of deeply rooted anxieties taking on a form that resonates across different societies and times. Now, in some cases, shadow people are reported in conjunction with other paranormal experiences, such as UFO sightings, poltergeist activity, or encounters with other cryptids. These instances of high strangeness suggest a possible link between shadow people and a broader spectrum of unexplained events. Researchers in the paranormal field consider these connections significant, hypothesizing that shadow people might be part of a more complex and interconnected web of supernatural activity. Now, Heidi Hollis, an author and paranormal researcher, is one of the most well-known figures to have reported encounters with shadow people. Hollis has written extensively about her experiences, describing shadow beings that would appear at the foot of her bed, often accompanied by a feeling of intense dread. These entities seemed to be aware of her and would vanish quickly when she tried to get a closer look. Hollis believes these beings are malevolent and has connected them to other paranormal phenomena in her research. Now, also the Hat Man has been seen before. One specific account comes from a man named Tim Brown, who encountered the Hat Man during his childhood. Brown vividly recalls waking up to find a tall, shadowy figure wearing a wide-brimmed hat standing at the foot of his bed. The figure exuded a menacing presence, leaving Tim paralyzed with fear. This experience was so impactful that it stayed with him throughout his life, prompting him to research and collect similar reports from around the world. A truck driver named Greg Newkirk shared his unsettling experience on a long-haul trip. While driving through a desolate stretch of road at night, he noticed a dark, human-shaped figure standing on the side of the road. Thinking that it was a person in need, he slowed down, only for the figure to vanish as he approached. Greg, a seasoned driver, found the encounter deeply unnerving and could not find any logical explanation for the sighting. And then this obviously left like a pretty profound impression on him. A woman named Donna Stewart recounted an experience in her office late one night. While working late, she saw a shadowy figure dart across the hallway out of the corner of her eye. Assuming it was a coworker, she called out but received no response. When she went to investigate, she found the office empty and all doors locked. This recurring event happened several times over the next few months, with other coworkers also reporting similar sightings. Now finally, Tom Buckner, a resident of an old Victorian house, reported frequent sightings of a shadow figure in his basement. Tom would often see a dark, human-like silhouette standing at the bottom of the stairs. The figure never moved, but it emitted a palpable sense of malevolence. Despite numerous attempts to confront or communicate with the entity, it would just disappear whenever he approached. That kind of stuff always made me scared of my basement when I was growing up. Like, I don't know if you have basements where you live, but for me, like, my basement was like always like so scary, dude. Like, I feel like I've seen shadow people like in my basement, just like at the corner of my eye, you know? Alright guys, and with that, we're done with the first layer. Let's move straight on to the next layer. Alright, and the first entry in this layer is the existence of aliens. The existence of aliens is one of the most captivating, unsolved paranormal mysteries. For decades, reports of UFO sightings, close encounters, and alleged alien abductions have fueled speculation about extraterrestrial life. Key events such as the Roswell incident in 1947 and the more recent Pentagon's release of UFO footage have kept the debate alive. Despite numerous eyewitness accounts and some physical evidence, the scientific community remains divided, with no conclusive proof of alien life. The Roswell incident is one of the most famous cases in UFO history. In 1947, an object crashed near Roswell, New Mexico. The US military initially reported it as a flying disc, but then later retracted the statement, claiming that it was a weather balloon. This contradiction sparked widespread speculation and conspiracy theories about a government cover-up of an extraterrestrial spacecraft. Witnesses reported seeing debris with strange symbols, and some claimed to have seen alien bodies. Despite numerous investigations and official statements, the true nature of the Roswell incident remains a mystery. In recent years, the release of 3 declassified videos by the US Department of Defense has reignited the interest in UFOs. These videos, captured by Navy pilots, show unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAP, performing maneuvers that defy known physics. The Pentagon confirmed the authenticity of the footage, but has not provided explanations for the object's origins. These revelations have led to renewed calls for transparency and further investigation into the possibility of extraterrestrial visitors. On the scientific front, the search for extraterrestrial life is bolstered by the Drake equation, formulated by astronomer Frank Drake in 1961. Not Aubrey Graham. Don't worry. We're not talking to young women around here. Anyways, this equation estimates the number of active, communicative extraterrestrial civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy. While the variables are highly speculative, the equation underscores the potential vastness of life in the universe. So I'm not going to go over the actual equation, but I think it's really interesting, so I'll have my editor put it on screen, and you can pause it if you want to look at it. Okay, you good? Alright, and then with this Drake equation, we have the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, or SETI. SETI is an exploratory science that seeks evidence of life in the universe by looking for some signature of its technology. The most common method is to search for radio signals from other civilizations. SETI uses large radio telescopes to scan the skies for transmissions that can't be naturally produced. Anyways, this stuff's just like really cool to me. I think that alien stuff is cool. But anyways, many individuals report personal encounters with UFOs and aliens, ranging from fleeting sightings of strange lights to detailed abduction experiences involving medical examinations and telepathic communication. These accounts are intriguing because of their consistency and the sincerity of the witnesses. One of the most notable cases is that of Betty Betty and Barney Hill. In 1961, the Hills claimed that they were taken aboard a spacecraft and subjected to medical examinations by humanoid beings. Their detailed descriptions of the aliens and the procedures that they underwent were revealed through hypnosis, and they've become a cornerstone of abduction literature. The consistency of their accounts, despite having literally no prior knowledge of any similar stories, lends a pretty eerie credibility to their claims. Another chilling case is that of Travis Walton, who disappeared for 5 days in 1975 after encountering a UFO while working in an Arizona forest. Walton and his coworkers saw a bright light and approached it, after which Walton was reportedly struck by a beam of light and taken aboard the craft. His subsequent return and detailed descriptions of the alien beings and their ship have been the subject of much debate and investigation. Walton's story was even dramatized in the film Fire in the Sky, further cementing its place in UFO lore. One of the most unsettling aspects of alien encounters is the reported lack of control experienced by the abductees. Many describe being paralyzed, unable to move or speak, and being subjected to invasive procedures without consent. This sense of helplessness and violation is a common theme in abduction stories, contributing to their terrifying nature. Now, skeptics often attribute these experiences to sleep paralysis and hypnagogic hallucinations, conditions where individuals wake up but are unable to move. We already talked about that a little bit with the shadow people, and how they often experience vivid and frightening hallucinations. While this explanation does account for some cases, it does not fully explain the physical evidence or the shared detailed accounts among multiple unrelated witnesses. Another aspect that adds to the fear and mystery here is the idea of government cover-up. Many believe that governments around the world are aware of alien visitations but are concealing the truth to avoid public panic or to exploit alien technology. The secrecy and conspiracy theories surrounding incidents like the Roswell crash and the alleged Area 51 alien research facility fuel this belief. The idea that there is hidden knowledge about extraterrestrial life creates an atmosphere of distrust and fear, which why should we trust the government? Let's be real. Now, some abductees report being a part of a hybridization program, where aliens supposedly conduct genetic experiments to create a hybrid species. These accounts often involve traumatic procedures in the presence of hybrid children. The notion that aliens might be interacting with human genetics adds a pretty deeply unsettling layer to the mystery, suggesting long-term plans and purposes beyond our understanding. The psychological impact on those who believe they have encountered aliens can be profound. Many suffer from PTSD, anxiety, and a sense of isolation, as they often struggle to find acceptance and understanding. It's kind of sad. The fear of ridicule and disbelief makes it challenging for them to seek help or share their experiences openly, which is pretty sad because it exacerbates their distress. Alright, next we're gonna talk about music heard on the moon. The moon has long been a source of fascination and mystery for humanity, but one of the most intriguing stories to emerge from our explorations involves mysterious music heard by astronauts. This puzzling event occurred during the Apollo 10 mission in 1969, a critical precursor to the historic Apollo 11 moon landing. While orbiting the moon, astronauts Thomas Stafford, John Young, and Eugene Cernan encountered an inexplicable phenomenon that left them both awestruck and bewildered. As the command module and lunar module traveled separately around the far side of the moon, completely cut off from the Earth's radio signals, the astronauts suddenly heard a strange, otherworldly music, described as a whistling or woo-woo sound. This eerie noise lasted for nearly an hour. The astronauts were understandably perplexed and initially hesitant to discuss it, fearing their credibility might be questioned. The incident was recorded in the mission's transcripts and tapes, but it remained classified for years, which kind of added to the aura of mystery surrounding it. When the recordings were finally declassified in 2008, they sparked a wave of curiosity and speculation, and I'm going to have my editor go ahead and play that video now so you can hear some of it.
That music even sounds outer spacey, doesn't it? Do you hear that? That whistling sound?
Some enthusiasts suggested that the sounds were of extraterrestrial origin, adding to the allure of the unknown that often accompanies space exploration. However, NASA and other experts provided more grounded explanations. They suggested that the sounds were likely caused by radio interference between the lunar module and the command module. The unique conditions of space and the close proximity of the two spacecrafts created an environment where such radio anomalies could occur. Despite these scientific explanations, the story of the moon music still continues to captivate the imagination. It's still pretty interesting to think about. Is it really the radio anomalies? Who knows? But there's not really much more to say about this one. So, like, the official stance from NASA is the sounds were likely due to the interaction between the VHF radios of the lunar module and the command module. This explanation is rooted in the fact that similar sounds were recorded during other Apollo missions under similar conditions, which supports the idea of a technical cause rather than an extraterrestrial one. However, not everyone is convinced by this explanation. The unique nature of the sounds, coupled with the fact that they were only heard when the spacecraft was on the far side of the moon, away from Earth's radio signals, leaves room for speculation. Like, why didn't they hear it all the time? So this one is, it's kind of unsolved, but it's also kind of solved. So anyways, we're just gonna ignore that. All right, next up on the iceberg, we have calls made from beyond the grave. So this is, it's just what it sounds like. It's like phone calls that are made from dead people. One of the most famous cases of such an event is the story of Charles Peck. In September 2008, Peck was a passenger on a Metrolink train in California that tragically collided with a freight train. The crash resulted in significant casualties, including Peck's. However, in the hours following the incident, his family received several phone calls from his cell phone. These calls, about 35 in total, were made over a period of about 11 hours. When family members answered, they heard only static or silence. Attempts to call back were unsuccessful. Eventually, Peck's body was found in the wreckage, and it was determined that he had died upon impact, making the source of those calls all the more mysterious. Another intriguing story involves the case of a man named Frank Jones. After his death, his widow claimed that she received numerous calls from his phone number. She reported hearing his voice, which would say familiar things that he used to say in life. Skeptics often dismiss such stories as hoaxes or the result of grief-induced hallucinations, but the consistency of these accounts across different cultures and times is pretty intriguing. There are several theories that try to explain these occurrences. From a psychological perspective, some suggest that grief and stress can cause people to perceive communications that aren't there as a way of coping with their loss. Technological explanations propose that these calls could be glitches or malfunctions in phone networks, which, while rare, can create the illusion of a call from a deceased person. However, these rational explanations often fall short of providing comfort or clarity to those who experience these uncanny events. In the realm of the paranormal, these calls are often seen as evidence of an afterlife or the ability of spirits to interact with the living through modern technology. Some paranormal investigators believe that the energy and emotions associated with such a sudden and tragic death could enable such communication, as spirits attempt to reach out to their loved ones. On Reddit, people are sharing phone calls and voicemails from beyond the grave that still defy explanation, so let's read a few of those. This one's from Reddit user u/PlankAshton14. This actually happened to me. My grandmother ended up having cancer in her liver, lungs, and the bottom of the esophagus. She was in the hospital for about 16 days and had a very small chemo treatment the day that she passed. It had been about 6 months since she passed when the phone calls occurred. Since I worked in an ER at the time, I always wore my Fitbit in case there was ever an emergency at home and I didn't have my phone on me. There had been a few family issues around this time with an aunt that everyone hates, and she's been selling things of hers and stealing from my grandpa. I cried and pleaded out loud for God or my grandma to ease my worries or hurt. I fell asleep soon after, but then I woke up suddenly to my Fitbit vibrating like crazy. I looked down and started checking who had texted or called, and it said missed call from Grandma Brenda cell and missed call from Grandma Brenda home. I stared at my Fitbit and thought, okay, number one, her cell phone line is gone. And number two, even if the phone is still working, my grandpa has his own cell phone. Number three, why would my grandpa be up at 3 a.m. and call me out of all people? I grab my phone and see the notifications don't even show up on my phone or in my call log. Then all of a sudden, I get 2 notifications on my phone saying voicemail from Grandma Brenda cell and voicemail from Grandma Brenda home. I didn't know if I should listen to them because I was freaked out, but I did. And the first one was her saying, I hope all is well with school, work, and your mom. I love you and just remember that always. Put your stress and worries aside. Call me back soon. That was enough for me. I didn't even listen to the second voicemail. Another one comes from Reddit u/Rizazi1. Just prior to my granny passing away, she had ordered some bits from a catalog. My dad popped over to her house around 2 weeks after she died and found a "We missed you" card on the doormat. So he called the distributor to explain and to ask if he could cancel the order. When he said he was phoning on behalf of Mrs. X from X address, the man stopped him, saying he had a call from her 2 days ago canceling her order. My dad explained that wasn't possible, but the guy insisted that's what happened, saying that my granny had apologized and said that she was unexpectedly going away. Obviously, my dad had some questions. Apparently, this wasn't the first message he'd had from the other side via a phone call. Weirdest thing ever. Alright, I'm gonna read one more because I think these are pretty interesting. This one comes from u/need answers now. I lost my sister to quote unquote. I put that in quotations because I still don't believe it was for the fact that she left no explanation for anybody, and more so, she didn't tell me anything before it. Being a year apart in age, her and I were extremely close. I was asleep in my bed with my girlfriend when I was woken up by my phone ringing. It woke her up too. This is how I know it wasn't me dreaming. It was 3:37 a.m. I know this because when it rang, I looked at the screen to see what number was calling me and saw the time. It was a private number or an unknown number. Usually, I won't answer such private phone calls, but being half asleep and guessing it was probably a drunk friend ringing to be picked up from somewhere, I answered. I said hello, and all I could hear was this muffled kind of static sounds. No one replied, so again I said hello. Again, no response, so I thought it was just a prank call or some crap, and I was about to hang up when I heard my name get called. Paul? It was clear as day and sounded 100% like my sister. I kind of froze and started to panic. Said her name a few times, pretty much pleading it to be her. Then all I heard was, "I'm sorry, I love you, please help me." The last bit is what really made me upset and uneasy, the "please help me." I asked her where she was, and then I heard a really loud screeching, and then it went back to the dial tone. God, this is creepy, bro. This is kind of creepy and sad too. Next up, we have the Tenome. The Tenome is a fascinating creature from Japanese folklore, known for its eerie and unsettling appearance. The name Tenome translates to eyes on hands, which precisely describes this yokai's most distinctive and horrifying feature. According to legend, the Tenome is a ghost or monster that has eyes in the palms of his hands instead of on his face, kind of like that one creature from Pan's Labyrinth. The origin story of the Tenome is steeped in tragedy and mystery. One popular tale describes an old blind man who was brutally attacked and left to die. In his dying moments, he wished to get eyes on his hands so that he could see his attackers and seek revenge. After his death, the vengeful spirit transformed into the Tenome, wandering the earth with eyes in his hands, searching for those who have wronged him and anyone unfortunate enough to cross his path. Encounters with the Tenome are described as terrifying. As the creature hunts, it raises its hands, revealing the glaring eyes that seem to peer into the souls of its victims. According to the lore, once the Tenome catches its prey, it uses its sharp claws to tear them apart, supposedly devouring their bones, leaving behind a gruesome scene. One account of a Tenome comes from a small village in Japan, where an elderly woman named Haruko reported a chilling encounter. Haruko lived alone in a rural area, surrounded by dense forests and far from the hustle and bustle of city life. One night, she woke to an odd feeling, as if someone or something was watching her. She couldn't shake the sensation and decided to get up and check her small house. As she moved through her dimly lit home, she noticed a small shadow on the wall. It was an unsettling shape, vaguely humanoid but distorted. Haruko's heart pounded as she followed the shadow to its source. In her living room, she saw a figure standing by the window. It was a tall, gaunt man with tattered clothes and an unnerving posture. But what struck her most were the eyes, glowing eerily, not on his face, but on the palms of his outstretched hands. Paralyzed with fear, Haruko couldn't move as the figure raised his hands, revealing the eyes that seemed to pierce through her. The eyes blinked and stared, conveying a mix of anger and sorrow. The figure didn't make any sound, but its presence was overwhelmingly oppressive. After what felt like an eternity, the figure slowly turned and walked towards the wall, through the wall, and then disappearing into the night. The next morning, Haruko shared her experience with the local priest, who told her that she might have encountered the Tenome. Now, there's no actual evidence to support these things, so I'm just gonna move on. And with that, we're done with layer 2. Let's get into layer 3, guys. Hell yeah. The first entry here in layer 3 is Don Decker. So let's learn about him. I'm gonna read from the wiki here. Don Decker of Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, claims that for a brief period of time, he was able to materialize rain out of thin air. He suspects that he was the victim of some sort of demonic possession. His bizarre experience began in February 1983, shortly after the death of his grandfather, 63-year-old James Kesso. On February 24th, 1984, James's funeral was held in Stroudsburg. He died of cirrhosis of the liver. Don, then 21, had been granted a furlough from the county jail to attend it. He was serving a 4 to 12 month sentence for receiving stolen property. It was the capstone of a troubled adolescence that involved drug use. What no one knew was that he was keeping a dark secret. Don says that James, the man that he was obliged to publicly mourn, had actually abused him physically from the time that he was 7 years old. No other part of the family knew about this. He said it was like good fighting evil. He felt that with James's death, the evil was gone and that everything would change. In fact, things would change, and drastically, but not in the way that Don could have ever imagined. After the funeral, he was completely unnerved by the way that his parents glorified James's memory. He decided to spend the night of Friday, February 25th with his friends Bob and Jeannie Kiefer, whom he had met a few months earlier. It was at the Kiefers' Ann Street home that all the uneasy feelings stirred up at James's funeral came back to haunt Don. He says that while he was in his upstairs bathroom getting ready for dinner, he suddenly felt strange and confused. He says it felt as though the air had gone out of the room and he was standing in a vacuum. He then fell to the floor and had a vision of an old man laughing and wearing a crown in the bathroom window. Deep scratches suddenly appeared on his wrist. When Don and the Kiefers sat down for dinner, they noticed the scratches and asked Don about them. He told them about the visions and the wounds that were caused by something upstairs. Shortly after dinner, he and Bob went to the living room. Suddenly, the air around Don vibrated with a deep chill. The Kiefers heard a loud noise from above. Almost simultaneously, water began to drip down the living room walls. Don fell into an eerie trance-like state. Bob asked Jeannie if she had water running. She said no. Bob had Jeannie come into the room and look at the water. He wondered if they had a leak, but he had no idea where it would be coming from. At a total loss, they decided to notify the landlord, Ron Van Wy. As Bob called Ron, Jeannie grabbed some pots and pans and put them under the water that was dripping from the ceiling. Don remained in a trance-like state. Bob told Ron that they had a problem and needed him to come down. Ron asked what the problem was, but Bob said that he couldn't say. But he insisted that Ron come there right away. When Ron arrived, he was just as puzzled as the Kiefers about the cause of the problem. At first, he thought there was something wrong with the plumbing, but then he remembered that there were no pipes in the front end of the house. He and Bob went upstairs and checked the bathroom. No leaks were found. Ron says there was nothing there that the water could have come from. After watching this for a while, Ron discovered that it was not only coming from the ceiling, it was also coming sideways from the wall and up from the floor. There was no basic direction it was coming from. It was also discovered that when the water struck them, it produced an oily smudge. So maybe it wasn't actually water. Ron called his wife, Romaine, and police officer John Bougen. Bougen did not know what to make of the strange scene inside the Kiefer house. He brought in his partner, a patrolman named Richard Wolbert. Wolbert said that Bougen initially told him to just walk into the house. Wolbert told him that he would not go inside unless he explained to him what he was walking into. And then Bougen just said, "Trust me, walk into the house." They walked inside, and almost immediately he was pelted by these droplets. As they stood inside the front door, Wolbert witnessed droplets of water traveling horizontally. He says one large ball of water passed right between him and Bougen and traveled out into the next room. Strangely, the water seemed to be only appearing in the living room. Bougen said he got a chill go up his spine when he walked through the house. He said that things were happening that he never dreamed could possibly happen. There was no way for them to explain what was going on. He believed that Don was possessed. At this point, Bougen and Wolbert left to report the incident to Stroudsburg Chief of Police Gary Roberts. While the Kiefers and Don, who had gone hours without food, walked across the street to get something to eat, Ron and Romaine remained behind. Remember, Ron and Romaine are the landlords. Ron says that once everyone else left, the rain stopped and the house returned to normal. He and Romaine began to think that the rain was coming from either Don or one of the Kiefers. They weren't sure which one it was coming from at the time, but since the rain left when they left, Ron and Romaine were sure it had to do with one of them. By that point, it had been 23 hours since the mysterious rain began. Pam Scrofano, who owned the restaurant opposite the Kiefers' house, had visited them earlier that day and seen the rain firsthand. She was convinced that it was the devil's handiwork and that the devil was acting through Don. She told the Kiefers they should call the church and have someone look at Don. Pam says that when she looked at Don, it looked like he was in a trance. She says that he looked at her, but he didn't know that she was there. She told the Kiefers that she believed he was possessed. While they were sitting in the restaurant, the rain started falling there as well. Pam says she never saw anything like that happen in her life. She went to her cash register and grabbed a crucifix from it. When Pam put her crucifix on Don and touched his skin, it began to burn him. He wanted to take it off, but she told him to leave it on. It then turned black. She was convinced he was possessed. She told the Kiefers that they needed to call the church and have a priest look at them. She says there is no way anyone could have played a joke like that. She was certain that it was real. And she was certain that Don was causing it without even realizing it. Even Don began to believe that he was somehow responsible. The rain inside the restaurant was the final straw. As he and the Kiefers left, the rain stopped. He says that the fact that the rain was following him made him certain that he had something to do with it. He notes that the rain never happened at the Kiefers' house until he showed up there. Back at the Kiefers' house, Romaine confronted Don, accusing him of somehow causing all the trouble on purpose. She and Jeannie yelled at him, telling him that he needed to make it stop. As they did this, the pots, pans, and cabinets in the kitchen started rattling, and then the lights went out. Don says he was levitated off the floor and his torso twisted. One witness says a green glow surrounded him. After floating in the air briefly, he screamed as he was pushed 5 feet across the kitchen into a corner. He says it felt like someone was pushing him all over his body at once. He says it scared him so much he felt, quote, like a newborn. After Don landed in the corner, more scratches appeared, this time in the shape of a cross near his inner elbow. Romaine says that she believes that some sort of evil spirit, possibly a demon, caused this. After that incident, Jeannie read from the Bible and tried to exorcise Don. The rain then started hitting her and only her. A few hours after the strange incident in the kitchen, officers Bougen and Wolbert arrived with Chief Roberts, a hardened skeptic. When Roberts came inside, he was also pelted with rain. Bougen believes that Roberts felt embarrassed and put on the spot, possibly thinking that they expected him to give them an answer about what was happening. Bougen says there is no way to explain what was happening. He thinks that Roberts was put in a position where he might have felt uncomfortable. Roberts would have been one of the only eyewitnesses from that bizarre night who would deny that anything out of the ordinary had happened. He told Bougen and Wolbert that what was happening was not a police problem, but a plumbing problem. They maintained that it was a police problem, but he said that Don and the Kiefers were probably playing a joke. Roberts ordered Bougen and Wolbert to leave the house. He instructed them not to file a report. In fact, he directed them not to speak of the incident at all. Wolbert thinks that Roberts just wanted out. Roberts could not give them an explanation for it, could not help them, and could not provide them with anything more than what they had already experienced and what they had come up with. Bougen says that Roberts just flatly denied that anything happened. He even tried to convince Bougen of that. Bougen, however, maintains that something unexplainable happened that night. The next day, acting against the specific orders of Roberts, 3 of his veteran officers went to the Kiefer home to try and figure out what was going on. They placed a paper bag over Don's head to make sure he was not creating the rain by spitting. One of the officers, Bill Davies, said that he gave Don a gold cross to hold. Almost immediately, Don told him that it was burning his hands and he threw it on the ground. When Davies picked it up, he noticed that it was hot and he has no explanation for that. Moments later, the rain started up again. Another officer, John Rundle, says that all of a sudden Don was lifted off the ground and thrown across the room. He says the force was as if a bus had hit Don. When they removed the bag from his head, they discovered 3 claw marks on the side of his neck, which drew blood. Rundle says he has no answer for what happened whatsoever. Davies says that he's been a cop for over 40 years and he's never run into anything like this ever. He says that there is always an explanation for something that happens, but in Don's case, he has no explanation. Finally, on the 3rd night, Sunday, February 27th, Ron was able to convince an evangelical preacher, Reverend Johnson, to come to the house and attempt an exorcism. Every Protestant minister and Catholic priest in Stroudsburg had turned Ron down. The Van Wise and the Kiefers kept vigil while Reverend Johnson prayed for Don. As she began to pray, Don appeared to go into a convulsion. He started to shake, and then he pulled himself up into a ball. Ron says that the longer Reverend Johnson prayed, the more Don began to relax. Romaine says that Don's body seemed to completely, quote, quiet down. As she stood there watching this, she felt the house itself seemed to take on a totally different, more peaceful feeling. By the time Reverend Johnson finished praying, the rain was gone. About an hour had passed since she arrived. Ron says that this was the last time they saw the rain at the house. Amazingly, the rain had stopped. Don attempted to return to his old self. Some witnesses believe that Reverend Johnson performed a miracle or an exorcism, but whatever it was, the results would prove only to be fleeting. After his furlough, Don returned to the Monroe County Jail. He was placed in a maximum security cell with another inmate, and then within a few days, the mysterious rain had once again materialized, this time in his cell. He says he was sitting there when he thought, I wish I could make it rain in here. Moments later, rain started coming out of the concrete floor. His cellmate was so panicked that he asked to be moved. Don says that at this point, he realized that he could, quote, do stuff with the rain. Don's demeanor frightened the other inmates. Some of the guards witnesses the rain defying gravity as it traveled up the cell walls and flew sideways through the air. A guard questioned Don about the rain. He told the guard that he could control it. This time it was different. This time he felt powerful. He realized he could manipulate the rain at will. The guard didn't believe him. He told him that if he could control the rain, he should make it rain in Warden Dave Keenhold's office. Keenhold says that in that same moment, he was sitting at his desk just writing a report and was by himself in the administration area. At the time, he didn't feel anything unusual, but he noticed that his shirt was drooping. At 8 p.m., the guard came in to talk about Don. The guard then noticed a spot on Keenhold's shirt. Keenhold says there was a spot of water about 4 inches long and 2 inches wide near the center of his sternum. When Keenhold and the guard walked down the hall towards Don's cell, they noticed a small ball of water heading toward them. The water struck Keenhold in the chest and then, quote, splashed off. He was startled and scared when he learned about Don's apparent abilities. The guard was scared as well. They were unable to explain what happened. Keenhold called a plumber to look into the rainwater in Don's cell, but when the plumber went into his cell, he became so upset that he turned around and walked out. He said, "Don't call me for this kind of stuff." Although he didn't tell Keenhold exactly what he saw, Keenhold believes the plumber also witnessed a strange rain and was frightened by it. Keenhold was convinced that an evil spirit was involved. He made a frantic call to the jail's chaplain, Reverend William Blackburn, asking him to come there because they needed his help. Reverend Blackburn agreed to meet with Don. When they first met, he felt that Don was a meek and mild-mannered young man. Don asked Reverend Blackburn for help. He explained all the things that had been happening to him. Reverend Blackburn believed that he was making it all up and told him to admit that. Almost immediately, Don's demeanor changed and a smell came into the room. Reverend Blackburn says it is the same smell that doctors and nurses report smelling when they go into the room of someone who is dying. He said it was that smell, but, quote, multiplied 5 times. It was a, quote, evil, foreboding smell. Don says he smelled it as well. Don told Reverend Blackburn that he had powers and that he could make it rain. At that point, he raised his hand and rubbed his fingers together, all of a sudden, a misty rain appeared in the room. Reverend Blackburn felt that he was in the presence of evil. He told Don that he was going to pray for him. Don told him he didn't want him to pray for him. Reverend Blackburn said, "I don't care whether you want me to or not." He opened up his Bible and started praying. Somehow the pages never got wet. He says it was a frightening thing to witness. He thinks that he was praying more for himself than for Don at that point. He says that after praying for a brief period, the rain stopped. Reverend Blackburn says that at this point, Don subsided and they could feel a peace in the room. Don said thank you and started crying. He and Reverend Blackburn hugged and prayed together. Reverend Blackburn says there is no doubt in his mind that Don was possessed. He says there's no way a human being could do what Don did in that room. He is certain that what Don did was spiritual and that it was not of God. Don says that the bizarre occurrences are over now and have never happened since. He hopes they will never happen again. He says he just goes day by day. He believes that what happened was James's doing. He says that James abused him when he was young and then had a chance to abuse him again after death. Paranormal investigator Chip Decker, no relation to Don, says that what makes Don's case so unique is that all the witnesses are credible. Many of them were well-seasoned police officers who were frightened by what they witnessed. Chip and Peter Jordan are the principal paranormal researchers in this case. They believe that somewhere there's information that is yet undiscovered that may help them unravel this mystery. Peter says that this case is by far the singularly most fascinating and important case that he has ever personally been involved in. He says that does not mean that he believes that it necessarily is proof of demonic infestation, but it is the case that comes the closest to supporting that hypothesis to him. Through his research, he has discovered that Don had been introduced to black magic as a small child. He believes that he may have had something to do with the occurrences. Now, this case is still unsolved. In October 2012, Don surrendered to the police after he was charged with setting fire to Dana's restaurant and tavern in Tobyhanna, Pennsylvania. According to the police, he was hired by the restaurant's owner to burn it down, and then he was later released on bail. But yeah, we still don't know what happened. This case was featured in like a TV show called Unsolved Mysteries, so it's kind of a little famous, I guess. But yeah, still unsolved. Crazy. Alright, bro. The next one we're gonna cover is called the Loco. The Loco is one of those spine-chilling legends from the depths of the Congo Basin in Central Africa, a region rich in both natural beauty and enigmatic folklore. The story of a Loco, though less known globally, is a compelling unsolved mystery that has intrigued locals and outsiders alike for generations. A Loco are said to be small, dwarf-like creatures that inhabit the densest and darkest parts of the forest. According to the lore, they are the spirits of ancestors who have taken on a sinister form, living within hollowed-out trees and fiercely guarding their territory. These creatures aren't just any spirits, but ones filled with malevolence and a thirst for revenge against the living. They're often described as being about 3 feet tall with piercing eyes and sharp claws. What makes the Loco particularly terrifying is their ability to enchant and lure humans into the forest using a small bell-like instrument. The sound of this bell is said to be irresistibly beautiful, drawing in anyone who hears it, much like the mythical sirens of Greek mythology. Once lured in, the unfortunate victim is often never seen again, having fallen victim to the Loco's deadly trap. There are numerous articles and first-hand accounts from the local people who live near the forest where Loco are said to dwell. One such story involves a hunter named Mokili, who ventured into the forest despite the warnings from his elders. Mokili was a skilled and experienced hunter, confident in his abilities to handle any danger. However, one evening, as he was setting up his camp, he heard the faint, enchanting sound of a bell. Captivated by the melody, he followed it deeper into the forest. His friends and family, who waited for his return, found only his belongings and no trace of him the next day. The elders solemnly declared that the Loco had taken him. Another chilling account comes from a woman named Nadili, who recounted her encounter with the Loco when she was a young girl. She described being drawn by the enchanting bell sound while fetching water from a stream. Mesmerized, she walked towards the sound, only to be pulled back by her grandmother, who had come searching for her. Her grandmother told her that she had narrowly escaped being another victim of the Loco. Nadili remembered the incident vividly, with the haunting sound of the bell still lingering in her memory. And then we're moving to the next layer, and in this next layer, the first one we have is the Marphalites. The Marphalites are one of those captivating and enduring unsolved mysteries in the United States. Located near the small town of Marfa and the remote deserts of West Texas, these mysterious lights have been intriguing residents and visitors for well over a century. Honestly, I wish I lived near Marfa. That's a pretty cool town. Pretty cool town name, guys. Can you imagine the jokes you can make with it? Like, Marfa these nuts. Anyways, described as floating orbs that appear and disappear without warning, the Marfa lights continue to baffle scientists and enthusiasts alike. First documented in the late 19th century, the Marfa lights were reportedly seen by early settlers and cowboys in the area. The earliest recorded sighting dates back to 1883 when a young cowboy named Robert Reed Ellison spotted the lights while driving cattle through the Paysanno Pass. He assumed that they were Apache campfires, but upon investigation, he found no evidence of camps or people. And since then, sightings have been frequent and the lights have become a well-known local phenomenon. The lights themselves are described as bright, colorful orbs that hover, split apart, merge, and then move rapidly across the horizon, much like the Brown Mountain Lights. They typically appear just above the horizon to the southwest of the town and are most often seen at night. The colors of the lights can vary from white to yellow, red, and even blue. Witnesses describe the lights as moving erratically, sometimes appearing to chase one another or darting quickly across the sky before vanishing. Numerous theories have been proposed to explain the Marfa lights. Some believe they are a natural phenomenon like ball lightning or swamp gas or car headlights, a lot of the same theories as the Brown Mountain Lights, and then others suggest that the lights could be caused by geological factors such as the release of gases from the earth. Scientific investigations have been conducted to uncover the mystery behind the Marfa lights. In the early 2000s, a team of investigators from the University of Texas at Dallas set up observation equipment to study the lights. They concluded that the majority of the lights could be attributed to car headlights on US Route 67, atmospheric reflections, and other mundane explanations. However, this conclusion did not satisfy everyone, including me, particularly those who have seen the lights in conditions that seem to rule out those possibilities. For locals, the Marfa lights are more than just a scientific curiosity. It's like kind of part of the town's identity and a significant tourist attraction. Each year, the Marfa Lights Festival draws crowds who hope to catch a glimpse of the mysterious orbs and participate in the local celebrations. The Marfa Lights Viewing Center, located 9 miles east of Marfa on US Route 90, provides an ideal spot for enthusiasts to watch the lights. Dude, I want to go there, dude. Poi meetup at the Marfa Lights Festival at the Marfa Lights Viewing Center. Who's down, bro? Who's down? Comment if you'll drive out to Texas, fly to Texas to see Poi and some mysterious lights. All right, the next on this iceberg is the Jack Froze mystery. The Jack Froze mystery is one of those modern mysteries that kind of like sends shivers down your spine. It began in November 2011, about 6 months after Jack Froze, a 32-year-old from Dunmore, Pennsylvania, passed away suddenly from a heart complication. His unexpected death left his friends and family devastated, but what followed added a layer of eerie mystery to their mourning. In the months after Jack's death, several of his close friends and family members received emails from his account. These weren't just generic spam messages or hackers playing a cruel joke. These emails contained specific personal details that only Jack would have known. One of the first recipients was Tim Hart, Jack's childhood friend. Tim received an email from Jack's account with the subject line, "I'm watching." The email itself referenced a conversation the two had shortly before Jack's death about cleaning Tim's attic, a place that Jack had joked about being cluttered. The email read, "Did you hear me? I'm at your house. Clean your effing attic. Clean your effing attic." The email understandably spooked Tim as it referenced a private conversation and it included details that only Jack and Tim knew. Tim, skeptical by nature, initially thought that it might have been a hacker, but the specific content made him question that assumption. Another friend, Jimmy McGraw, received an email from Jack's account that seemed to address a recent ankle injury that Jimmy had sustained. The email said, "Hey Jim, how you doing? I knew you were gonna break your ankle, tried to warn you, gotta be careful. Tell Rocco I'm sorry about his fence." This email was particularly chilling because Jimmy had indeed broken his ankle after Jack's death, and Rocco was the nickname of a mutual friend whose fence Jimmy had accidentally damaged. These emails led to a flurry of speculation and fear among Jack's friends and family. How could Jack, who was dead, send such specific and timely messages? There were a few explanations, none of which were entirely satisfying. Some suggested that Jack might have pre-written the emails and set them to send at specific times using a delayed delivery service. But this theory didn't hold up because, given the personal and timely nature of the messages. Others speculated that a close friend or family member with intimate knowledge of Jack's relationships and conversations could have sent the emails, but no one confessed to doing so. So yeah, this one's still unsolved. It's kind of crazy. I don't know, but if it's really him, it's kind of spooky. Next up, we have Phoenix Lights. The Phoenix Lights incident is one of the most widely witnessed UFO sightings in history, captivating both skeptics and believers alike. It occurred on the evening of March 13th, 1997, over the skies of Arizona, Nevada, and the Mexican state of Sonora. The event was witnessed by thousands of people, making it a significant case in the annals of UFO lore due to the sheer number of credible witnesses. So the first reports came in at around around 7:30 p.m. when a flight of lights were seen moving across the sky in a V-shaped formation. These lights were described as bright and white, and many witnesses reported that they seemed to be attached to a massive, silent craft that blocked out the stars as it passed overhead. The lights moved slowly and purposefully, and some observers claimed to see a secondary light trailing the first, main formation. As the night progressed, the lights were seen by residents in cities such as Phoenix, Prescott, and Tucson. The sightings spanned several hours, and the reports varied slightly depending on the location and time of the observation. Some witnesses described seeing 5 distinct lights, while others reported a series of orbs that seemed to hover in a straight line before blinking out one by one. Now, what made the Phoenix lights particularly compelling was just the number of credible witnesses who reported the event. These included law enforcement officers, military personnel, and even the governor of Arizona at the time. Initially, the governor ridiculed the sighting, but then years later, he admitted that he had seen the lights himself and described the craft as, quote, otherworldly. In the days following the incident, the media coverage was extensive and numerous explanations were put forward. The most commonly cited official explanation was that the lights were flares dropped by military aircraft during a training exercise at the Barry Goldwater Range, which is a large military testing area southwest of Phoenix. The Air Force confirmed that the A-10 Warthog aircraft had been flying in the area and conducting exercises that involved flare drops, which they claimed accounted for the lights in the sky. However, this was kind of not right. Many witnesses and UFO researchers were not satisfied with this explanation. They argued that the flares could not account for the V-shaped formation seen earlier in the evening, which appeared to be a solid craft rather than individual lights. Additionally, the silent nature of the craft and its slow, steady movement didn't match the behavior of flares, which drift and flicker as they fall. So who knows, man? Aliens could be real. If you think aliens are real, put it in the comments below. Next up, we have the Hessdalen lights. These ones are pretty cool. The Hessdalen lights are unidentified lights which have been observed in a 12-kilometer long or 7.5-mile long stretch of the Hessdalen Valley in rural central Norway periodically since at least the 1930s. The Hessdalen lights appear both by day and by night, and they seem to float through and above the valley. They're usually bright white, yellow, or red, and they can appear above and below the horizon. The duration of the phenomenon may be a few seconds to well over an hour. Sometimes the lights move with extreme speed, and at other times they seem to sway slowly back and forth. On yet other occasions, they just hover in midair. Unusual lights have been reported in the region since at least the 1930s. Especially high activity occurred between December 1981 and mid-1984, during which the lights were observed 15 to 20 times per week, attracting many overnight tourists. As of 2010, the number of observations has dwindled with only 10 to 20 sightings yearly. Since 1983, Project Hessdalen, initiated by UFO Norge and UFOs Verge, have attempted to investigate the lights. This project was active as field investigations during 1983 to 1985. A group of scientists, engineers, and journalists collaborated as the Triangle Project in 1997 and 1998, and they recorded the lights in a pyramid shape that bounced up and down. In 1998, the Hessdalen Automatic Measurement Station was set up in the valley to register and record the appearance of lights. Later, a program named EMBLA was initiated to bring together established scientists and students to researching the lights. Despite ongoing research, there's still no consensus for an explanation of this phenomenon. A number of potentially plausible theories have been put forward, though. There have been some sightings that have been disproven. They've just been positively identified as misperceptions of astronomical bodies, aircraft, car headlights, or mirages. One explanation attributes the phenomenon to an incompletely understood combustion airborne dust from mining in the area. The analysis identified hydrogen, oxygen, and other elements, including titanium. It was thought that this occurs in Hessdalen because of the large deposits of scandium there, but it still isn't exactly a perfect way to describe what was happening. One hypothesis put forward in 2010 suggests that the lights were formed by a cluster of macroscopic Coulomb crystals in a plasma produced by the ionization of air and dust by alpha particles during radon decay in the dusty atmosphere. So to put that in simple words, basically, one idea suggests that the lights are created by a cluster of special particles called Coulomb crystals. These crystals form in a plasma, which is a state of matter created when air and dust are ionized or electrically charged by alpha particles. These particles are produced during the decay of radon gas in the atmosphere. The light's behavior, like their movement and color, might be explained by this dust plasma model. For instance, when radon decays, it releases alpha particles and other radioactive elements which can cause helium emissions seen in the lights. A physicist even found higher radioactivity levels on rocks near where the lights were seen, supporting this idea. Simulations also show that dust and ionized gas can form patterns like double helixes similar to some of the light's shapes. But again, none of these have been conclusively proven to be like what was happening here and like why the lights were seen, so we still don't know for sure. It's still an unsolved mystery. Next up, we have 2374. Philip K. Dick, the renowned science fiction author, experienced one of the most bizarre and compelling episodes of his life in early 1974, often referred to as 2374 or February to March 1974. It all began on February 20th, 1974, when Dick was recovering from the effects of sodium penphenol, a drug used during his dental surgery. He was at home when a young woman delivered Darvin, a pain medication. Struck by her beauty and particularly by the gold necklace that she wore, Dick asked about its fish-shaped design. The woman explained that it was a symbol used by early Christians known as the ichthys. As the sun glinted off the pendant, Dick experienced a striking vision, a pink beam of light that seemed to emanate from the necklace and directly into his mind. This pink beam of light had a profound effect on Dick. He described it as imparting wisdom and even a sense of clairvoyance. In one startling instance, the beam gave him the knowledge that his infant son was dangerously ill. Acting on this information, Dick and his wife rushed their son to the hospital where doctors confirmed a serious condition that required immediate attention. This incident bolstered Dick's beliefs that the pink beam were not only real, but also intelligent and benevolent. Following this initial experience, Dick began to have a series of vivid and often overwhelming hallucinations. Initially, he thought they might be side effects of his medication, but as the weeks passed, he found this explanation increasingly implausible. He described these hallucinations to his friend Charles Platt as, quote, an invasion of my mind by a transcendently rational mind, suggesting that he felt as though he had been living in a state of insanity his whole life and had suddenly become sane. Throughout February and March of 1974, these hallucinations persisted and evolved. Dick saw geometric patterns, brief visions of Jesus, and scenes from ancient Rome. As these experiences became more intense, he began to feel as if he were living two lives simultaneously. One as himself, Philip K. Dick, and another as Thomas, a Christian persecuted by the Romans in the 1st century AD. He referred to the rational mind behind these visions as Zebra, God, and Velus, an acronym for Vast Active Living Intelligence System. These experiences had a profound impact on Dick's work. He wrote about them in a series of novels, starting with the semi-autobiographical Radio Free Albemuth and continuing with Velus, The Divine Invasion, and The Transmigration of Timothy Archer. These books explore themes of reality, divinity, and the nature of human consciousness, heavily influenced by his experiences during 2374. Now, Dick's experiences also led him to some pretty rather extreme actions. In 1974, he wrote a letter to the FBI accusing various individuals, including Frederick Jameson, a professor at the University of California, San Diego, of being foreign agents for the Warsaw Pact. He even suggested that Stanislaw Lem, the famous Polish science fiction writer, was not a real person but a committee operating under communist orders to control public opinion. At one point, Dick believed that he was now taken over by a spirit of the prophet Elijah. He found connections between his novel Flow My Tears, The Policeman Said, and a story from the book of Acts in the Bible, despite having never read that biblical text. He documented these experiences and his reflections on them in a private journal he called Exegesis, parts of which were later published posthumously. Philip K. Dick continued to explore these themes in his writing until his death in 1982. His last novel, The Transmigration of Timothy Archer, was published shortly after his death and is often seen as a culmination of the ideas and experiences that began in the months of 1974. The 2374 incident remains one of the most intriguing aspects of Dick's life. Like, it's still an unsolved crazy mystery, like what happened, because like it's obviously not real, right? Next, let's talk about the Naga Fireball. The Naga Fireballs, also known as Mekong Lights, are one of Southeast Asia's most intriguing and enduring unsolved mysteries. This phenomenon occurs annually along the Mekong River, particularly near the town of Phon Phisai in Thailand, usually during the end of the Buddhist Lent in October. Thousands of locals and tourists gather to witness this spectacle where glowing red orbs, ranging from the size of a pea to the size of a basketball, rise silently from the river and ascend into the night sky. Descriptions of the fireballs vary, but they are generally described as reddish orbs that emerge from the river's surface and float upward without making any noise. The fireballs can appear sporadically over several hours, sometimes in large clusters or in singular instances. Witnesses report that the lights are bright and disappear after a few hundred meters, leaving no trace. The origin of the Naga fireballs has been a topic of much debate and speculation. Several hypotheses have been proposed, but none of them have been conclusively proven. One popular local belief is that the fireballs fireballs are created by the mythical serpent Naga, which is said to inhabit the Mekong River. According to this legend, the Naga breathes out the fireballs as a way of celebrating the end of the Buddhist Lent and to pay respect to the Buddha. On the scientific front, various theories have also been suggested to explain this phenomenon. One hypothesis is that the fireballs are a natural result of methane gas released from the riverbed. This gas, produced by the decomposition of organic material, could ignite when it comes into contact with the air, creating the glowing orbs that are seen. However, critics of this theory point out that similar methane gas emissions occur in other rivers around the world without producing these like fireballs. And then another theory proposes that the lights are a form of phosphine gas, which can spontaneously combust when mixed with certain elements in the air. But this is also met with skepticism, as it doesn't fully explain the regularity and specific timing of the fireballs. And then some skeptics argue that the phenomenon is probably just man-made, that like the fireworks or flares are released from the riverbanks to create the effect. But this explanation fails to account for the numerous and consistent reports of the fireballs long before the pyrotechnics like needed to do it were available and like modern and like invented. So despite these theories, no definitive scientific explanation has been confirmed. The Thai government and local authorities have conducted investigations, but the elusive nature of these fireballs and their sporadic appearances still make it challenging like to investigate, and we still don't know for sure like what's causing this. But thousands of people still go there every year to see it. It's crazy that this is just like a thing that happens. Next up, we're gonna talk about the haunting of Wat Samian Nari. Now, full transparency, I'm gonna read from an article about this one because I found an article that goes really in depth. I'm just gonna use that as my resource for this, and you can find all the links in the description of the Iceberg. So this guy named Noom was driving back to his apartment in Lat Faro at 3 a.m. after a night of partying on RCA. Along the way, two good-looking women dressed in black flagged him down for a ride. Being a red-blooded guy heading home alone, Noom picked them up. They wanted to go to the Wat Samian Nari, a temple in the capital's district. One sat in the passenger seat and the other in the back. They barely spoke, giving only terse replies to Noom's attempts to chat them up. They looked sad, so Noom gave up asking for their numbers. He thought the pretty girls must have had just like a terrible day, and given their black clothing, he assumed they were going to grieve for a relative at the temple. It's what happened next, as later described by Noom on a paranormal radio program, that vaulted the story into the imaginations and created yet another ghost story for people to share and shudder over in a city with possibly the most hauntings per capita, Bangkok. As Noom told Shock FM nearly 15 years ago, he was pulling up to Wat Samian Nari when he turned to ask where they wanted him to park, but they were gone. Shocked, confused, and in disbelief, Noom looked around for the girls, and that's when he saw them about 10 meters away, crawling on the train tracks that ran past the temple. Well, not all of them, only their top halves, pulling their torsos along the track, their entrails dragging behind. Noom passed out, and next thing he knew, he was waking up in a hospital. His parents said he'd been found unconscious. No one believed his story, including the doctor, who said he must have just been drunk. Afterward, Noom said he developed heart trouble and never returned to the area. His story, told to Shock FM host DJ Pong, is one of the most repeated time and again in the many media channels which comprise a thriving industry serving an insatiable appetite every day, not just Halloween. On programs such as Workpoint Entertainment's Man vs. Ghost, people call in with their own paranormal encounters, often involving contact with loved ones from beyond the grave. And like other stories, Noom's stories spread pretty quickly and became popular. It struck a chord with taxi drivers, and soon the original tale spawned copycats with similar tales of black-clad hotties haunting the same spot. Now, with the proliferation of the internet and blogs, a new platform has since emerged for breathless discussion of ghost stories. There, people poring over such stories claim to solve the mystery of the temple's haunted hitchhikers. The consensus of the many blog posts about ghosts out there say that back in the 1990s, two sisters were killed while riding a motorbike to their mother's funeral there. A train hit them, cutting their bodies in half. Some even claim that a newspaper ran a front-page story headlined "Horrible Death Cut in Half" with the two sisters' names. But no story could be found in the archive of that newspaper, but the archive only goes back to 1997, so it could have happened in the 1991, 1992, etc. So we don't know. But yeah, it's completely unsolved still. We don't know what the hell Noom's story really was. Was it a ghost? Yeah, probably. Sure. Next up on the iceberg, we have the Hornet Spook Light. And for this one, I'm getting my information from JoplinMissouri.org. Bobbing and bouncing along a dirt road northeast Oklahoma is the Hornet Spook Light, a paranormal enigma for more than a century. Described most often as an orange ball of light, the orb travels from east to west along a 4-mile gravel road called the Devil's Promenade by area locals. The spook light, often referred to as the Joplin Spook Light or the Tri-State Spook Light, is actually in Oklahoma, near the small town of Quapaw. However, it is most is often seen from the east, which is why it's been attached to the tiny hamlet of Hornet, Missouri, and the larger, better-known town of Joplin. According to the legend, the spook light was first seen by Indians along the infamous Trail of Tears in 1836. However, the first official report occurred in 1881 in a publication called the Ozark Spook Light. Also, I guess by Indians they mean Native Americans, I'm assuming? Okay, Joplin, Missouri.org, you gotta stop being racist. This ball of fire, described as varying from the size of a baseball to a basketball, dances and spins down the center of the road at high speeds, rising and hovering above the treetops before it retreats and disappears. Others have said that it sways from side to side like a lantern being carried by some invisible force. In any event, the orange fire-like ball has reportedly been appearing nightly for well over 100 years. According to locals, the best time to view the spook light is between the hours of 10 p.m. and midnight, and it tends to shy away from large groups and loud sounds. Though many paranormal and scientific investigators have studied the light, including the Army Corps of Engineers, no one has been able to provide a conclusive answer as to the origin of the light. Many explanations have been presented over the years, including escaping natural gas, reflecting car lights and billboards, and the will-o-wisps. However, all of these explanations have failed to be conclusive. As to the theory of escaping natural gas, which is common in marshy areas, the Hornet light is seemingly not affected by wind or by rain, and how would it self-ignite? One possible explanation that is not easily discounted, but also not yet proven conclusive, is that the lights are electrical atmospheric charges. In areas where rocks deep below the Earth's surface are shifting and grinding, an electrical charge can be produced. This area, lying on a fault line running east from New Madrid, Missouri, westward to Oklahoma, was the site of 4 earthquakes during the 18th century. These types of electrical fields are most commonly associated with earthquakes. Other interesting legends also abound about the light that provide a more ghostly explanation. The oldest is the story of a Quapaw Indian maiden who fell in love with a young brave. However, her father would not allow her to marry the man as he did not have a large enough dowry? Is that a dowry? Yeah, dowry. God, am I just brain rot stupid? Have I been watching too much Skibbity Toilet and What the Sigma clips to know what a dowry is? This looks like a pretty common word. I just looked it up. Anyways, whatever. The pair eloped, but they were soon pursued by a party of warriors. And according to the legend, when the couple was close to being apprehended, they joined hands above the Spring River and leaped to their deaths. It was shortly after this event that the light began to appear, and then it was attributed to the spirits of the young lovers. Another legend tells the story of a miner whose cabin was attacked by Native Americans when he was away. Upon his return, he found his wife and children missing and is said to continue looking for them along the old road, searching with his lantern. That one sounds a little racist though. Others say that the spook light is the ghost of an Osage Native American chief who was decapitated in the area and continues to search for his lost head, with the lantern held high in his hand. But I don't know, man. I gotta go see it for myself, I guess, bro. And that's the end of the Iceberg, guys. I hope you really enjoyed this video. I had a bunch of fun making this one, and if this video gets enough views, it seems you guys like it, I would love to cover other subgenres of unsolved mysteries. This is just the paranormal side of it. There's so many other kinds of unsolved mysteries that I'd love to talk about in an Iceberg video, so let me know what you guys want to see in the comments. Have a great night, everybody, and sweet dreams.